everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic? Let's do it. Serious. Weird towns, disappearing restaurants, creepy gas stations. What's your unexplainable story about places that shouldn't exist? Part 2. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I was doing work at a gas plant up by Fort Saskatchewan, Alberta. The plant was pretty up north, so we'd visit the small towns in the area for lunch. I think we were either in Gibbons or Redwater, and we walked into a normal-looking log cabin restaurant. Inside was a huge Old West-style saloon, completely empty of people but full of decor. It had a stage, multiple bars, and all that good stuff. There was one person working there, with crabby service, cash only, that kind of stuff. This space would have fit the entire town, and still had room to spare. Like, why would you build a place to hold 300 to 400 people in a town with 200 people? The other really weird thing is that when the shifts change, there will be these pickup trucks with strippers in the back dancing away to advertise for the local establishments. Those poor girls, people, driving would toss loonies and toonies at them, eh? I drove to Cisco Ghost Town in Utah. I don't usually get that hair on the back of your neck feeling. Well, here I definitely did. There are still a few occupied homes nestled amongst all these abandoned buildings and vehicles. Even Zach Bagans would have run for the hills. I don't recall the town in Arizona because I was younger, but we stopped at a cafe that I swore was called something like Looney Tunes Cafe, or that's just how I associated it. I got such an odd vibe just from entering it, but they had the walls painted with slightly off Looney Tune characters and very strangely stuffed Looney Tune characters, mismatched heads to bodies, weird positions, and I don't recall a single one looking dusty. Our female server kept putting her hands on my shoulders. I was 10 to 12 at this point, and kept insisting we use the restroom. It was a very odd place that I could never find again, but it was 2002 to 2004. When I was in my 20s before Google Maps, we had to print directions, so we were driving from East Tennessee to Pensacola, Florida. The route is down into Alabama, then turns south at Birmingham, I think. One thing led to another, and we missed the turn south and realized it when we were almost in Mississippi. So we got out the old paper map and decided, F it, we'll just drive down a highway in Mississippi. We had the time, so why not? The highway just goes down the state. It was mostly just what you would expect. A bunch of small towns over and over. We had to get gas soon, and we came to a city called Shibuya. The name was funny, so I remember it. This town hasn't changed since 1966. It was like a time capsule. We pulled into McCoy's service center. I bought a shirt because the name of the town at the station. And the pumps were the old flip a handle up on the side, spinning wheel, not electric, prepay cash only. We walk in, and there's no AC, and there's no drink cooler. It's basically like an old mom-and-pop mechanic service station. A big fat guy was sitting next to a huge fan to cool off from the heat, and there was a guy behind the counter who eyed us as foreigners. The fat guy asked us where we were headed in this deep Mississippi Southern mumble that even someone from the South couldn't understand. The man took our cash again. No credit cards are allowed. I bought a shirt for the name. Only XXL was available, which was odd. It just felt odd. We both noticed and started to pay more attention. There were no fast food places, just a few stoplights and some old churches. I don't know. It just felt like walking back in time. A place that, if you were unlucky enough to be born there, you were never going to leave. It was less the friendly town and more the racist deep south, where they would lynch a black person for accidentally stumbling into the wrong town, even in what would have been 2005-ish. Every year or two I take a road trip from the Midwest down to the Southwest, usually alone, always passing through Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, etc. I was cruising through New Mexico on the loneliest stretch of highway. I hadn't seen a car in at least an hour when I realized I had just about had a quarter tank left. I went in for about maybe 20 to 30 miles when I finally saw a gas station. I pull up, pump my gas, and decide to head in for snacks and a bathroom break. Now, let me describe this place. It's in the middle of nowhere, nothing for miles, just sand and rocks and cacti. It was a pretty rundown looking gas station, but that's not too much cause for concern considering a lot of places in the middle of nowhere look like this. It was shanty and made of wood, not like an old Western style wood, more like a serial killer in the middle of the woods kind of wood. You know that damp wood could break apart if you kicked it? Anyway, so I walk in, and there is a convenience store side and I guess you can call it diner side. The first thing I noticed was that everyone turned to look at me and definitely knew I was not from around here. There were four unbearably grimy men, wife beater tanks with stains, pants that are dirty. They're just tan from New Mexico sun. Just dirty, fat, greasy, middle aged men. Sitting at one of the four diner tables, just staring me down. Shit you not, there was a spit bucket for their tobacco too. It was disgusting. The only other person I saw was the clerk, so I asked where the restroom was. This 6 foot tall, definitely meth looking woman doesn't say a word and just points to the hallway. I say thank you and start walking. As soon as I turn, these people, I can feel their eyes. I get to this hallway, which is about 10 to 15 feet long. One overhead light is working fine, one is flickering, and on each wall are two giant corkboards filled with missing person flyers. These things went back from the 1980s to the present. It was 2015 at the time, and were mostly women and children. I stopped dead in my tracks, maybe 5 feet into the hallway, when chills rushed over me, and I just stared at all the posters, maybe a solid minute. There were literally hundreds. And then I turned around slowly and walked back toward the exit as calmly as I could. I could feel the eyes of all the unsmiling people as I nervously paced toward the door while telling the clerk I forgot my wallet in my car, like I needed to explain something. My hands hit the door, and I glanced back to see only 3 men sitting at the table now. My heart dropped and total panic kicked in. The second my foot was out the door, I ran as fast as I could to the car, got in, and sped off. It was hands down the creepiest, most unnerving gas station or place I've ever been. Well, maybe there was some ill intent, or maybe they wanted to say hi to you and be best friends forever. Very creepy place. I was in Missouri trying to find a nature reserve. GPS took us down a road that was getting increasingly worn out, but there wasn't a good place to turn around. We got to the end where there was an abandoned train station with 2 people in lawn chairs sitting out in front who started walking towards the car when we pulled up. I was able to turn around and get out of there. Around 10ish years ago, hyped on too much young love and just plain stupidity, my boyfriend at the time and I went for a late night mystery drive. We started around 10 p.m., so we drove around talking shit and spooking stories while flipping coins or feeling vibes to decide which way we would go next. We turned another random dirt road when sadly we saw a bird that was dead on the side of the road. Not unusual, but sad. So we kept going, and a few minutes later there was a dead cat, again sad, but not unusual. So we kept going, then a dead fox. Okay, weird. Then a somewhat large dog-looking thing. By now we'd noticed that these animals were all seemingly fresh, but getting larger, and were a little uneasy and acting stupid about it, and we kept going, until there was a kangaroo right in the middle of the road, and our hairs on our arms stood up. So we hightailed it out of there. When we get back near the bird, my boyfriend asked me to grab his GPS from the back seat and start navigating home. Cool, yes, and definitely. A few weeks go by, and we get curious, so we set out again. But this time it's bright, middle of the day, no clouds in the sky, and we use the navigation system to reverse how we'd driven. We follow it and decide we've gone this far, let's go through. It took minutes, way less than the night we'd been there. We were even driving slower. Remembering still gives me the creeps. My friend and I went on the Natchez Trace Trail, a scenic drive through Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee. We planned to camp at some of the sites because we thought they sounded cool, like Rocky Springs, which was the site of a ghost town, and also had a campground. The actual campground of Ghost Town was pretty chill and not weird at all, but it was our first night, and we geniuses forgot a lighter. We drove out to find the nearest town and saw a place that said something like general store or mercantile, and on an otherwise pretty rural road, which literally does not appear named on a map. We stepped in very confidently, and then had a record scratch moment when it was actually a bar. People drinking, something out of a cooler, moonshine, all redneck looking men. The closest old man turned around, and I swear his one eye was like the yolk of an egg, very trembly, and like it was sliding out of its socket. Oh, and we are both women. We stuttered something out about needing a lighter and thinking this was a store, and an egg-eyed man wordlessly reached into his pocket and got out a lighter and gave it to us. He didn't even look at us. No one else was talking. The vibe was very good. As we were leaving, one of the men called to us to ask where we were staying that night. They could pay us a visit. We were pretty spooked because it was probably obvious we were out-of-towners camping at probably the only camping spot out-of-towners in this very rural area would go. I went to Rocky Springs thinking we might get some spooky paranormal tingles, and instead spent the night worrying about a pack of creepy men showing up in a truck with nasty things in mind. Cyberjaya, Malaysia. I was opening a call center, so I worked nights to match US hours. Our typical lunch spot was closed for a few days. One guy says he knows a place close by. We pile in his car, and off we go into the jungle. This was 10 or 15 years or so ago. At the time, if you headed towards KL, it stayed pretty urban or suburban. If you headed in other directions, it got dark fast. We're out on these roads, and these streetlights go from regular intervals to what seemed like one every 5 kilometers. It quickly becomes obvious that the driver is lost. He stopped looking for a place to eat and is outright just looking for a way back to the office. Then we saw this house with a counter where the car park should be, just lighting up the jungle around it. We pulled in mostly for directions. It turns out this was a random little mamak stall built into one of these people's houses. They operated for the farms in the area that were in the process of shutting down but stayed open to feed us. Out in the middle of the jungle, I had some of the freshest and bombest Indo-Chinese food. They were even able to give us directions to get back to the office area. We tried to find that spot again like a week later and thought we reversed the directions. Nothing but trees. Some 20 odd years ago, I took my kids and parents on a driving trip through eastern coast of Canada. My dad, who was currently driving, decided to take his shortcut off the main highway down a dirt road. About 5 minutes down this road, things got eerily quiet. We should be able to hear birds, the trees rustling, and cicadas, yet nothing. It was too quiet. Dad starts slowing down. I'm busy looking at the map. I know where we turned off, and there was no designated road on our map. I'm worried that I can't find it. I look up from the map, and I realize nobody is talking. Everyone is looking out their windows. There are little stick people and stick designs hanging from the trees. Some are just shapes, and others are more intricately made, dangling, swaying slowly. Between this and the fact that it was dead quiet, I made an instant decision and told Dad to turn around and leave as quickly as possible. I felt a huge pressure in my ears, like they needed to be popped. Mom had goosebumps, and my dad said we were just being silly. He obliged and got us out of there. This one is not creepy so much as just frustrating because it involves a place and perhaps an entire route seemingly disappearing out of nowhere. It was about 11 or 12 years ago, so I was a teenager. My dad, my sister, her friend, and I were having a beach day, driving from New York to Westerly, Rhode Island. At the time, none of this seemed weird, but apparently we took I-84 all the way there. It was one of the rare times I got shotgun on a road trip, so I was paying attention to the drive and hit massive traffic on the way. I remember vividly being stuck in traffic near some mountains and thinking that was weird since we were going to the beach. Then, on the way back, we took some back roads, and while we were still in Rhode Island, we stopped at this seafood place. Dad had said it was an all-you-can-eat place, and I loved seafood, so I was hyped. But there were next to no cars there, so we wanted to go in first and see if it was open, check prices, etc. He came out, saying we weren't eating because it was $64 a person. I remember thinking, holy shit, that can't be right, After all, it was 2006 or 7, and my naive self had never been to a place that cost more than $15 for a person to eat. Years later, I moved to New London, Connecticut, which is right near the Connecticut Rhode Island border, and half an hour from the beach in Westerly. I now realize that either my memories from that day are messed up, or we went somewhere that doesn't exist. Westerly is off I-95, not 84, and I've tried several times to find that seafood place, but I was never able to find it. Dad confirmed the place existed, but he couldn't remember the name. I haven't asked about the I-84 mountains or traffic thing, but now I'm thinking it might be time to do some research on that. I was hiking with some friends in Colorado. It was a beautiful sunny day up until we were in the middle of the trail. Then it started pouring, and we weren't especially prepared. Still a little tired and a little delirious from the night before, we trekked on. We hadn't seen another hiker in half an hour or so, but after a while, a couple of guys came the opposite way on the trail. They reassured us that the cabin would reach us soon. Not sure what that meant. We kept going. After about an hour, we came upon a small cabin that looked ancient. We walked in. Inside, it was clear that this was from a very, very long time ago. Looking at the corner table, two children were eating bread and peanut butter. Next to them were presumably their parents, speaking to a man with skin so wrinkled it looked like he'd emerged from a decade spent in a bathtub. Nobody acknowledged our entrance. The moment I stepped in, I got a feeling like I was in purgatory or like a Black Lodge in Twin Peaks. I turned around and saw a newspaper clip attached to the door. In the center is a picture of this old man. The headline read, 109 Native American tribe name, can't recall man, loves to draw. After reading that, everyone exchanged weird looks, and we left after 5 minutes, but it felt like days. Nothing really supernatural, but I still get the feeling of that cabin every once in a while, a year later.